Many individuals in Sri Lanka are facing challenges as a result of the current economic crisis, and people are looking for ways to lessen the burden in any way they can. Kasun Abeyasinghe, who lives in Sri Lanka, started to cycle to work using an e-bike or an electric assisted bicycle. And he's joining us today on Sagacity to talk about his experience. Kasun, welcome to Sagacity. You've been riding to work for over a month now, 12 kilometers one way, so about 24 kilometers per day. Tell us, what has your experience been like with cycling to work?
To start off with, so I've never cycled much to outside, our house or anything. I tried cycling to my university quite long time back, which is quite close by. But when I thought about cycling to work, which is 12 kilometers away, it's quite a challenge. So far, it's been a really good change, even though it felt like a risk when I started off. So I'm glad I started cycling to work on an e-bike, especially. It's been a good experience actually so far.
I have a lot more questions to ask you about the experience, the positives and the negatives. But before that, let's talk a little bit about the bicycle, the e-bike, for those who might not be familiar with what it is. So first of all, what is the difference between a traditional bicycle and an e-bike?
Yeah, so a traditional bicycle, basically you have to pedal all the way throughout the time that you're traveling to whatever destination you want to go. And the difference between that and an e-bike is that there's a motor and a battery that assists you on your journey. So you don't have to put as much effort to riding the bicycle, which means you can go for a longer distance. As a person, his effort is less, or you can put the same amount of effort to go a much longer distance. So that is basically the advantage you have on an e-bike. The bike is quite light. I mean, I was surprised how light it was at the beginning. It has to be charged for about 4 hours. It does about 30 kilometers in distance per charge. So since my range is 24 kilometers, I can just cycle and back with a single charge. The charger is just like a laptop charger. Just you can either plug it to the bicycle or you can remove the battery. The battery is it's a plug and play battery. You just fix it there and it just stays in place. Just can take the battery into the house and then plug it straight into the battery also. So yeah, it's pretty convenient that way. And I just put it to charge in the night and I go to sleep, get up in the morning, and it's fully charged. There's charge protection, which means you don't overcharge the battery. There's a red light that just turns green and cuts off power to the battery when it says you can charge it. Charging time is 4 hours, but if you keep it plugged for like overnight for like 8-9 hours, it doesn't hurt the battery. That's a really good feature it has.
Of course, yeah. And the other thing with an e-bike is that if the battery dies, you can still manually ride the bike.
Yeah, you can cycle the bike. Yeah. So in my experience, so in the morning I go to work in a completely electric mode. I don't cycle, but on my way back though, I tend to cycle a lot more because I'm just getting home, and it's also good for my health. So yeah.
Definitely. And how much does it cost in Sri Lanka to buy an e-bike or a traditional bicycle, if you know the price?
Well, traditional bicycles, with the current state of the economy, they are skyrocketing at the moment. Within last week and this week, the prices have been around for a traditional bike between around 30,000 to all the way it goes to about 100,000. There's basically no limit. Depends on what brand, basically. So that's for a traditional bicycle. For an e-bike, the basic one starts at about 200,000 and goes all the way to about 700,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Depends on there are different bikes have different features. So yeah, it caters a large demographic of people.
Great. And in your journey of cycling to work, have you faced any hurdles while you're cycling to work?
Oh, yes. Basically, the biggest hurdle would be trying to balance the bike in very low speeds in traffic.
Okay.
And yeah, That would be the biggest hurdle, because you're on an e-bike and it pretty much performs as the same as a motorcycle in traffic, because you have this, just like bicycles, there's a throttle on the hand. I just throttle and it just starts shooting through, by, accelerating just like a normal motorbike. So outside of that, so you need to behave like a motorcycle in slow speeds, but when you start catching up speed, you have to get back to being a bicycle. So there are different behavior patterns for the two when you're riding it on the main roads. Basically, in Sri Lanka, it's quite a challenge riding a bike in the city roads, because many things actually. Traditionally, Sri Lanka is not centric towards cycling. So trying to introduce yourself into a cycling group of people who cyclists is a bit of a hurdle there. Yeah, that is like the biggest thing.
Yeah, I was actually, my next question is about that. I was going to ask you, are there enough bike lanes in Sri Lanka?
So Outer Colombo has bike lanes. If I have to name some, it's like Kadwela, Malape, Koswata, those areas. And then again, towards Maharagama side, there's a few. But inner suburbs, not in a suburb, inner Colombo, towards the heart of Colombo, there aren't any cycling lanes. But it doesn't also affect you much, because inner Colombo is there's always traffic. So basically you and other drivers are going at pretty much the same speeds. So it's not a big problem. But the moment you join into roads like large, motorways or something, it's a bit risky, because the speed difference between you and the others are quite a big gap, and you have to always stay on the side of the lane. Yeah, I try to avoid main roads as much as possible during my journey, and yeah, it has helped a lot. So the roads that I take are predominantly very traffic heavy roads, maybe one of the three most traffic jam roads in Colombo. This region through, they call it Batramulla, Rajagiriya, Horton Place, that road. And because of that, it's an advantage for me, because whether there is traffic or not, I tend to spend the same amount of time on the road, going to work and coming back. So if the roads are very free, I only go earlier than average by about 10 minutes. So my whole journey takes about 40 minutes. If it's jam packed, it takes only about 45 to 50 minutes, and only about 30 to 35 minutes if there is no traffic at all. So it doesn't make much of a difference for me, unlike in a car, where it would take me about only 20 to 20 minutes on a free road, but about 1.5 hours when there's traffic. So it's a big plus for me on that day.
Nice. And have you faced any challenges in terms of the infrastructure that's in the country? So bike lanes is one thing, but sometimes I don't know if there's like very well done pavements, for example. Do you have something like that?
There are some roads that have been, laid up several times. So the road is very uneven, but it's not. So if I take the 12 kilometers that I go in one way as 100%, the problems are within like 10% of the time, 10% of the journey. And everywhere else, it's just I'm being mindful of any rocks or anything like that that puts me, catches me off guard maybe. But that's a general cycling thing. So yeah, generally on my route, it's pretty okay.
The next question is there anything else that you would like to add about the e-bike? Anything related to the features that our audience might benefit from?
Yeah, so the bicycle itself you can customize. Most of these suppliers, these manufacturers give you the flexibility of customizing your bike to thinner wheels or wider wheels. So there's a compromise there of if you make the wheels bigger, your range gets a bit shorter, but it's more safer to cycle on the roads. If you make them much narrower or thinner, it becomes a little more tricky to cycle, but your range gets quite a boost. So there's a compromise there. And then some manufacturers give you range extenders, that is bigger batteries, so that you can go a further distance. Of course, the downside is it comes at a cost. Other thing I would say is when riding the bicycle, there's a few quirks that you need to get used to, like how fast it accelerates. Suddenly it catches you off guard. And uh, and for someone who would like to buy the bicycle, the first thing you should do and you must do is that you should go to one of these suppliers and ride a bicycle for about 6 to 7 kilometers by, of course, with their permission, and then see for yourself whether it suits you or not. So that is the first thing I did, because I didn't want to make such an investment straight out of the blue just because it's cheaper and realize, okay, after 5 kilometers, my knees hurt, or after, I tire myself too much. If you feel that, then, you should think of other means. But definitely the first thing you should do is test a bike, take it out on the road, physically ride the bike for like 5 or 6 kilometers and see if it's good for you. And the other thing is, if your daily travels are up to about 15 kilometers one way, that is the ideal or the maximum range you should be doing, nothing more than that. Because if you drain the battery all the way to like a very low value, it's not good for the battery, basically. So we need to keep the battery healthy most of the time, because they are very large batteries. And the range is a big problem, because some people, go between districts, and that is not a cycling feat. But people who are, at apartments or staying close to their workplace, it's very beneficial, because when I calculated my cost per kilometer for the bicycle, it comes to about 60 cents per kilometer. This is without the cost of the battery, because I can't say how much the battery will cost in the future. But at current prices, it costs me about 4.5 to 6 rupees a kilometer. Whereas when I drive to work, which I did for the past 8 years, it costs me about close to about 140 rupees a kilometer.
Oh, wow.
So it's a huge save there. And my return on investment. So when I bought the bike, it cost me about 220,000 rupees. And if I cycle for the next, so I've cycled over 1.5 months now. And if I cycle for the next 6 months, actually 4.5 months, I would have my return on the investment would be covered. So it's a big, it's a big investment for me, because very rarely that you recover your investments under 6 months for any project or any equipment that you purchase. So it's a big thing. And with the prices hiking recently, my return on my investment is getting even shorter. It's like about 3.5 months now.
Definitely.
So yeah, they should, if you are deciding on this, they should pretty much act quite quickly.
Good advice. I was going to ask you if you have any advice to people who live in the Western province who might be planning to follow your path. So that was some good advice. Any other advice for those who are living in the Western province?
So another thing I forgot to say was problems with our country being a tropical country. It's always raining on and off. So I have a cycler's raincoat. So it's basically long pants and a jacket, and it's perfect. It doesn't do anything to me. I just put my shoes in my bag and just start cycling. I just have a pair of slippers in my bag, and I get to work with no issues on that sense, even if it rains or not. Yeah, that is one thing. And for the people in the Western let's say, in the
I meant
city limits.
basically I meant like Colombo, within Colombo.
Colombo, Western Province, city people, it's ideal for city people actually, because inside cities, there's always so much traffic.
Yeah.
And this works so well for me for any problem. Because having a bicycle in the house is very beneficial, even for these small errands that we run for the shop or stuff like that. I think having a bicycle in general is a very good thing.
Definitely. And any advice for people who are in other provinces who might be planning to use an e-bike or a traditional bicycle, in this environment? I don't know if you have any experience with the rest of the country, but since you have been cycling, or people who might be cycling elsewhere, do you have any advice for those who are outside?
People outside. So outside of the main cities, people are using a lot of bicycles. And generally it's the, let's say, 40 plus age group in Sri Lanka, not the younger crowd. Not the younger crowd. The younger crowd is very much eager for instant access to everything. So they don't like the patience. I mean, they don't have the patience to, take the time to travel even. So outside, they prefer to go by bus, because in Sri Lanka, unlike other countries, public transport is much more diverse around the country. I mean, you can get on a bus and go anywhere pretty much in the island, and people don't know that. So we have bus halts and depots everywhere, and buses go on almost all the roads in the island. So the transport sector it's preferred that they use that, because most of the people outside cities have to travel a long distance compared to the people in cities. And that's basically why people move into cities. So having a bicycle itself is a good thing, because one thing is definitely exercise directly. Second thing is, running short errands. So you save 100% on that travel. And the other advice for someone who would take an e-bike is, if their range one way is under 15 kilometers, it's definitely the thing to go for.
Great. Oh, I forgot to ask you one more question. Have you faced any challenges with the traffic, which you talked about a little bit more, but more importantly, people's driving habits and behaviors that are kind of unique to countries like Sri Lanka?
Yes, there are a few issues there, but it's manageable because I've done it for the last, 48 days now. People, cut you off on your lane and stuff like that, because everyone in the morning is panicking to bypass the traffic. So they just want to pass whoever they can. And also they can't do it because there's so much traffic on the road. So I travel in the morning at about 7 o'clock, which is peak traffic. And then come back also at around 5:36. Again, it's just jam-packed. So driving habits aren't much of a problem to me, because they aren't pretty much driving, they're just stuck in traffic. So I just take the side and I just travel it at my own pace. And yeah, so it's not a big problem unless you go into open roads. So avoiding main roads most of the time and getting to my destination is what I try to prioritize every time.
The next question is, why did you choose an e-bike over a traditional bicycle?
Yes, so it's definitely, the first thing is the range that I have to go for. And the fact that being a very humid country, cycling itself, you start sweating a lot. And if I go to work cycling 12 kilometers, and 95% of the offices in the island have no place to wash yourself or get up, have a bath, or get freshened up. So the e-bike lets me not cycle when I want to and cycle when I want. And in the mornings, I just go on the breeze. I just breeze through the air, just seated on the bicycle, because it's electrically powered. And then because of that, I'm quite fresh. I wouldn't say 100%, but I'm not sweating at all. I am a little, I do get a bit tired, but that was at the beginning, I would say, the first few weeks. But now I've kind of come into an equilibrium as to how to ride the bike in a manner that I won't be tired by the end of the journey. So now I just go into work, keep the bike, go back, sit at my office desk and start working. No problems.
I actually had a question about sweating because people had asked a question saying, what do you do if it gets too sweaty? And I was going to ask you, what do you have to say to them? So I guess if you're using an e-bike, don't pedal on your way to work and pedal back when you get home.
Yeah.
Any other
that is
advice
definitely. Sorry?
Any other advice for them?
No, that is perfectly on point.
Yeah.
That is the advice I could give. Right? Just pedal. Don't need to pedal on your way to work, but pedal on your way back.
So the next question is, there's this fear associated with riding bicycles in countries like Sri Lanka, where, in certain areas, driving is not as organized as it would be in other countries. What would you say to people who are a little worried about their safety, or even parents who are worried about their adult children's safety and deciding to cycle?
Yes, that was one of the biggest problems even I had when I parked my car and then started cycling to work now. It is an issue. Safety is a big issue. The fact that it's always traffic jammed when I'm driving really reduces my risk of having any safety problems. Yeah, that is the thing. I don't cycle in the night. No way after darkness. I mean, after like 6:30 in the evening, I don't cycle. Early morning also I don't, which is I'm talking about like 5 o'clock in the morning. So yeah, it definitely has to be a concern when it comes to deciding whether to cycle or not. But I took a risk on that and cycled to work anyway. I just wanted to cycle to work once and see if it's good, and it was. So I stuck with it. If it wasn't going to be good, I would have resold my bike to someone who would want to do it. So anyway, the resale value of a bicycle is very good these days because the prices are hiking up. I mean, it's almost 1-to-1. You can buy it and you can sell it at the same price, even though it's used, basically. Yeah. So yeah, that is what I have to say about safety. So if there is a lot of traffic, it is very safe to drive here because traffic here is just stuck.
Yeah. Do you wear a helmet, by the way?
I do. I wear a thing called half face helmet, which is just covering the head and nothing in front. I do wear a helmet, and because this bike travels a bit faster than the average bicycle, I do have a visor also, because otherwise the breeze tends to dry my eyes a lot. Yeah, I do wear a helmet.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to be safe while you're riding a bicycle. The next question I have is, what can the government do at this time to help people who choose to cycle to work? Let's talk about short-term things the government can do to help those who choose to cycle.
Well, short term, it's very difficult to say they could do anything at this moment. They just look at ways to. So the current government has that's very centric on roads and infrastructure than accessibility. So that's a big problem the government has. They just build roads and roads, but who's going to access, why, or how is a big question that they never answer. And so short term, they can't really do anything except to allow manufacturers and these assembling people so they can help them short term, the importers, and ask them to build some stuff in-house or make stuff by themselves. But in long term, however, the government could help the cycling community a bit more, because technology has developed to such an extent where I don't have to cycle on a bicycle anymore. So coming to that extent, I ride the bicycle without having to sweat. So biggest problem in Sri Lanka is the fact that anyone would cycle if the climate was like 5 degrees cooler. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it is in the morning and in the night. But even though that is the case, the moment you start pedaling with your legs, instantly you start sweating, and then people can't go to work like that. I mean, it is really uncomfortable and difficult to go to work like that. And e-bikes have solved half of the problem, or most of the problem, I would say, about sweating and getting tired. And the government actually can work on a long-term project or a process in bringing or introducing this to people. Like, basically, it has to happen not from the government, but the government helping companies in the export development board or assemblers and designers and fabricators of these bicycles in Sri Lanka. That is where they should be concerned about. Not, they can't really spread awareness to people, but rather they can do it to manufacturers as an option. Yeah, that's the long-term thing.
And you touched on a good point in terms of helping out the manufacturers. So, I mean, I've heard that there's a great demand for even e-bikes right now, that
Yes.
shops are running out of them. I mean, in this crisis, it might not be possible to import more bicycles because everything is super expensive at the time as well. But in the not really in the long run, but in the medium run, I would say, not too far away, I think the country can even start manufacturing certain parts, perhaps. I mean, I don't know how much they do in the country, but
They can.
do. But also focusing on making the environment bike friendly with more lanes and better infrastructure and so on. So, and road safety as well.
Yeah. One thing, the one point that you touched on was not being allowed to import. So that's why I specifically mentioned the Export Development Board. So those are companies that are registered to, I mean, prominently their work is to export, which means they're bringing in foreign exchange. And they can still bring in stuff. They can import stuff because they are working with dollars. So those are the companies that could actually work on, registered companies in the Export Development Board are the companies that actually can cater to this problem. Yeah, because they're just working with foreign exchange. They're not taking money out of the country or anything. So yeah, that is the option there is, but I don't know 100% to answer that question, because I don't know what the legality or the legislative approaches they have in, how they manage their finances in that regard. But companies that are doing e-bikes are still bringing in some, like they are bringing in units. So they don't bring an e-bike per se. What they do is they bring in parts and they assemble it here. So that is still allowed, and that is what they're doing.
Definitely increasing that in the country, or the availability and the affordability of e-bikes is not just short-term investment. I mean, it has so many benefits for the population at large. Investing in that now can have so many long-term benefits. So we've come to the end of the questions I have for you. Is there anything else that you would like to add?
I think I've answered most of the questions in proper order and as descriptive as possible. So I guess not. Yes, thank you.
Actions speak so much louder than words. And Kasun, you are an example that I quite admire. So much respect to you for choosing to cycle to work. While it is very normal to see people cycle to work in other countries like Japan, it is hard to get people to hop on board with something like that in Sri Lanka, especially with the infrastructure challenges and all the challenges that you mentioned, which is quite understandable. But you've done it, and you are an inspiration. Thank you so much for being here on Sagacity today and sharing your experience with us.
Thank you very much, Madara.
Bye. Wait, Kasun's gone, but I have something else to say to you. Cycling can not only help people in this current situation in Sri Lanka, but it also has multiple other benefits. The WHO states that 80% of Sri Lankans die of non-communicable diseases. So that means heart disease, stroke, diabetes, cancer. And that's just the number of deaths caused by non-communicable diseases, not the disease burden on the healthcare system or the country. And many studies have found strong evidence that cycling is associated with a reduction of the risk of non-communicable diseases like heart disease, stroke, type 2 diabetes, certain type of cancers, depression, and the list goes on. It is very likely that these numbers will go down if more people in Sri Lanka starts to cycle. Cycling is medicine, and it's not simply a quote. To the Sri Lankan government, I hope you take actions now and in the future to make things easier and safer for those who wish to cycle to work or elsewhere. And the people on the road, please drive attentively. I can't stress this enough. Please remember that cyclists share the road as well. Thank you so much for being here today and listening to me. I hope this video is helpful to you. Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.